The world is full of masks, some crafted from porcelain and lace, others woven from words and deception. You've met them before. The ones who smile too easily, who speak in honeyed tones, who offer friendship laced with silent daggers. They think their disguise is flawless, that their performance is convincing. But you saw through them the moment they spoke. It wasn't their words that betrayed them, nor their expressions. It was something deeper, the way their eyes flickered, the way their energy felt hollow. Most people fall for the illusion. They believe the lies, get ensnared in the charm. But you knew. From the first moment, you saw them for what they were. And that knowledge, it made them nervous. Because a person like you is dangerous. You don't fall for pretty words. You don't get fooled by crocodile tears. You don't need proof, you just know. And the moment you looked into their eyes, their mask cracked. They felt it. That flicker of unease, that moment of exposure. But they covered it up quickly, pressing their mask tighter against their face, hoping you wouldn't notice. But you did. And you always would. The gathering storm. They entered your life when you least expected it. A friendly face in a time of struggle, a voice of comfort in moments of doubt. They appeared as everything you needed, kind, understanding, supportive. The kind of person who listens, who nods at the right times, who mirrors your emotions perfectly. Too perfectly. You watched them closely. At first, you played along, letting them believe their act was working. They told you stories, about how much they had suffered, how deeply they understood pain. They made themselves a victim in every tale, painting themselves as pure, as helpless. It was all so carefully crafted, every word placed with precision. But there was something off. The way their smile never quite reached their eyes. The way their voice shifted ever so slightly when they spoke about others. A flicker of something darker beneath the surface. Envy. Resentment. Malice. You knew their type. You had seen them before. The ones who wear kindness like a costume, who speak of love but carry daggers in their hands. They don't build, they destroy. Not openly, never directly. They whisper, they manipulate, they weave webs of falsehoods until their victims are ensnared. But you refused to be caught. The first test. They wanted something from you. Power. Influence. Control. They studied you, testing your weaknesses, searching for cracks in your armor. And when they thought they found one, they struck. It started small. A subtle jab disguised as a joke. A slight change in tone, barely noticeable to anyone else. A piece of information, twisted just enough to plant doubt in the minds of others. They were careful, precise. But so were you. You saw every move, anticipated every play. And instead of reacting, you observed. Because you understood something they didn't. When a snake reveals its fangs, you don't flinch. You watch. You learn. And then, when the moment is right, you strike. They expected you to trust them, to believe their words, to lean on them. But you did the opposite. You watched. You waited. And then, when they least expected it, you let them know. I see you. The unraveling. It was just 3 words, but they shattered everything. Their smile faltered, their hands clenched. For the first time, they looked afraid. Because they had spent their entire life perfecting the mask, controlling the illusion. And you had just torn it apart in a single breath. They tried to recover, laughing it off, acting as if nothing had changed. But you saw it. The panic behind their eyes. The way their voice wavered. They knew. They knew that you had unraveled their game. That their tricks wouldn't work on you. And worse, they knew that you held the power now. Because when you see someone's true face, you own their soul. The fear of exposure. From that moment, everything shifted. They grew cautious around you, measured their words more carefully. You were no longer a target. You were a threat. And threats had to be eliminated. So they tried again. Harder this time. They turned others against you, whispering lies, planting seeds of doubt. They spun stories, painted themselves as the victim once more. They wanted to make you look like the villain. But you didn't need to fight. You didn't need to expose them. Because they would do it themselves. That's the thing about people who wear masks. They can't keep them on forever. Eventually, the weight becomes too much. The cracks grow wider, the facade begins to crumble. And when they try to hold it together, that's when the truth slips through. All you had to do was wait. The inevitable fall. And then it happened. Not by your hand, not by your words, but by their own actions. They overplayed their hand, told one too many lies, manipulated one too many people. And the world began to see. One by one, their supporters questioned them. Their stories didn't add up, their words didn't match their actions. The people they had fooled started to notice the same cracks you had seen from the beginning. And then, like dominoes, it all fell apart. The same people who once sang their praises turned against them. Their power crumbled. Their influence faded. And as they stood in the wreckage of their own making, they looked at you. And in their eyes, there was terror. Because they knew. They knew that from the very beginning, you had seen them for what they truly were. That no matter how many masks they wore, how many lies they told, how many tricks they played, you had never been fooled. And that scared them more than anything. The final lesson. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need to fight. You had already won. Because power doesn't belong to the one who speaks the loudest, who deceives the best, who controls the most. True power belongs to the one who sees. And you had seen them from the very start. They wore a mask. But you saw their true face instantly. The mask had finally fallen. Their carefully constructed illusion lay shattered at their feet, and the world they once controlled was slipping through their fingers. But people like them, they don't go down without a fight. They were desperate now, scrambling to regain the power they once had. The whispers grew louder, the lies more elaborate. They tried to rewrite the story, to make themselves the victim once more. But it was too late. Because once a mask is torn off, it can never be worn the same way again. The last attempt. At first, they tried denial. They laughed it off, pretended nothing had changed. Acted as if the cracks weren't there, as if the truth wasn't spreading like wildfire. They gathered those who still believed, clinging to them like a lifeline. But you knew the game. They weren't fighting for redemption. They weren't seeking forgiveness. They were just trying to survive. Because for people like them, power isn't just a desire, it's a necessity. And without it, they are nothing. Then came the second stage, deflection. Suddenly, it wasn't about their lies anymore. It was about you. You became the problem, the enemy. They pointed fingers, twisting reality, painting you as the one who started it all. They needed someone to blame. But the problem with blaming a person who sees is that no one believes them. You didn't have to defend yourself. The truth was already out in the open. And no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't shove it back into the shadows. The turning point. It was slow at first, but then, the people who once followed them began to step away. Not all at once, not dramatically, but little by little. A question here, a doubt there. The loyalty they had relied on was eroding beneath them, slipping through their grasp like sand. Because people can forgive mistakes. They can even forgive manipulation. But they never forget when they've been made a fool. And that's what they had done. They had convinced so many that they were someone worth trusting. Someone worth defending. And now, every single person who had once stood by them felt betrayed. Not by you. By them. And in that betrayal, there was no redemption. The fear in their eyes. You saw it clearly. The way their shoulders tensed, the way their voice shook beneath the bravado. The way their eyes darted, searching for an escape. They had spent so long wearing a mask, they had forgotten how to exist without it. Now, stripped of their illusion, they were vulnerable. Weak. Exposed. But even then, they wouldn't admit it. They still tried to fight, still tried to cling to whatever scraps of influence they had left. They lashed out, hoping to drag someone, anyone, down with them. But no one wanted to drown beside them. And in that moment, they finally understood. They weren't feared anymore. They weren't admired. They were pitied. The inevitable end. They disappeared after that. Not immediately, not dramatically. Just faded. Their voice became quieter, their presence weaker. The people they had once controlled stopped listening. And without an audience, what were they? Nothing. They would try again, of course. People like them always do. They would find new faces, new places, new ways to manipulate. But it would never be the same. Because the truth leaves scars, and this time, the mask would never fit as perfectly as before. But you walked away, untouched. Because you had never needed to fight them. You had never needed to expose them. You had done the one thing they could never stand. You had seen them, and that alone had destroyed them. The final lesson. Some people spend their entire lives perfecting the art of deception. They weave their lies carefully, craft their image meticulously, manipulate effortlessly. And most people will fall for it. But not you. Because you have something they will never understand. You don't need to wear a mask. You don't need to deceive, to manipulate, to control. Because power, true power, doesn't come from illusion. It comes from clarity, from perception, from the ability to see beyond the surface and understand the truth that lies beneath. They wore a mask, but you saw their true face instantly, and that is why you won.